after the orphans and the widows, and I think he meant it literally. There's spiritual orphans, and then there are orphans, and I really want to give a face to what's going on in the world. And you know, we were never going to be adoptive parents. It was never in our goal book. It was never something we desired. It was definitely, we had our 2 children, and we were just really blessed. And I've always had an extra love for children. So my husband has always said they can come and stay with us, and if we need to host someone for the summer, but then they can go home. And so we've had kids come in and out of our house. We've had a child from Taiwan, an exchange student, and kids from Germany that would come, and he was always very happy when they left. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is because it's really a God thing that's going on right now. Because in 2011, Alex's sister Irina called me, and she's really involved in adoption and in orphan ministry. And so this was all in Maine, when we were living in Maine. Which, by the way, to backtrack, if you wonder where we're from, he was born and raised in Russia, I was born and raised in Germany. So it's another crazy part of our story.
For another night.
For another night, exactly. I know, right? So when she called me in 2011, she said, hey Irma, we're starting something new. We're going to start a hosting program with the orphans that are older, like 8 years and older. And these kids will most likely never ever be picked for adoption. You know, if somebody really wants to be adoptive parents, they usually go for the young ones, and they want the babies or the toddlers. And so once they're like 7, 8, 9 years old, typically they stay in the orphanage until they're 16, they age out of the system, and then most of the time they're fending for themselves. And they repeat the cycle. And this one lady started this ministry to really help the orphans past when they come out of the orphanage, to help them manage life, because they have no skills to manage life. And she's like, you know, we're bringing kids here, come over, pick a child. And I was like, on the road, I turned around, I'm like, yes, I'm gonna get a child for the summer. And I'm so excited about it. I called my husband, I'm like, hey, do you care if we like take in an orphan for the summer? He's like, go for it, you know. So Leah, our daughter, she's like, I don't really want a sister. And so we went to my sister-in-law's house, and I picked up 2 pictures, because you can literally, they give you the pictures of the kids that qualify for the program, which I'll share with you guys in a minute, how you can be part of a program like that, and to give an orphan a summer away from all the hardship that they're going through. And so I picked up 2 pictures, I brought them home, and Leah instantly picked Julia. I mean, it was just like, we want this child. And so fast forward, you pay anywhere from...
How old was she at the time?
She was 12. She turned 13 in our home. So what happens is you fund it. So you pay for the visa, for the airline ticket. It runs anywhere, depends on which ministry you choose, $2,500 to $3,000. And they come with their clothing on their back. I mean, most of them will not even have a toothbrush with them or anything. So you're really taking them in, and you're supporting them, you know, and hopefully give them something to take home. And so they went and they picked them up from New York, and we couldn't be there that night to pick them up, so we had to be there the next morning. And most orphans, it just depends on what their story is. They're very shy towards their family. Like, some gravitate sooner, some are a bit more shy. Definitely towards men, they're definitely more shy, because typically, if they have been in an orphanage, they've probably, you know, had some kind of abuse happen to them. So my sister-in-law calls me, and she's like, you're gonna have your hands full, this is an emotional one. I'm like, okay. She's like, she keeps asking for her mom and dad. Like, where's my mom and dad? Like, and I'm like, okay. So we pick her up the next day, and we drive into my sister-in-law's house. I'll never forget it. And here she comes running. I mean, she jumps on my arm. She's like, Mom, let's go home. And I was like, okay. And I had my mom with me. She's like, is that my grandma? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, oh, grandma. And so my mom speaks Russian. She was born and raised in Russia, so she could communicate really well. I understand quite a bit Russian, but obviously I couldn't, you know, she doesn't speak any English. And so we're in the car, and she's like, where's my dad? And I'm like, oh boy. You know, here's my husband who's like, you know, I love my kids, I love my family, but, you know, they can come, but just don't bug me, you know. And so I call him, I'm like, get ready, because here's a child asking for her dad. Like, So he's like, okay. So we get home, and I will never forget, he walks up the stairs, and she looks around the corner, she's like, Dad, like Papa, you know, and jumps at him. And it was like, that was the beginning of just a melting story. I mean, she was as if she was, I've always felt like she was my child born with another mother. You know, she literally was just so much part of our family, and she loved Noah and she loved Leah, and they had their sibling rivals, and then, you know, there was times when, you know, adoption kind of came up, and for the first time he was like, you know what, maybe I'm open to it, you know. And 8 weeks went by, and we had to drop her off. We drove to New York with all the other orphans, and I think there was 14 of them. And she vomited so much in the bus because she didn't want to go. And she says, just don't send me back, Mom. You know, I want to be with you. And probably the hardest day in my life, sending her back. And she had a brother with her, Vova, and he was staying with Alex's cousin at the time because they hosted him. And so we started talking about adoption, but that was in 2011. Life happened. We ended up moving to Germany in 2012 for business, and I really, in my heart, believe that we were disobedient to not moving forward. And but as life happens, right, we just kind of have to live out the consequences. And so we thought we were going to be in Germany for 3 to 6 months, and life happened 2.5 years later, and we just lost touch. She had aged out of the system. As a matter of fact, the following year, she was hosted by Alex's cousin in Pennsylvania. They wanted to adopt both of them, and she refused. She says, no, I have a mom and dad, and I'll find them. So I didn't even know this. And so when you're 16, you age out of the system, and you basically have to go. You know, they call it school. Most of the time it's cold warehouses, little rooms. They've never been taught life. They get little money from the government. Most of the time they don't know how to handle it, so they waste it. And then they're usually without money, without food. Then the next step happens is prostitution and child slavery. 85% of the girls go either into prostitution free will, or they end up falling into prostitution slavery because they have nowhere to go. They have no sense of family, they have no sense of belonging, and here's someone that'll promise them food and clothing, and they all have to prostitute themselves. Most boys end up in jail within 2 years after leaving the orphanage. So we, in my heart, I always kept thinking, you know, where is she? And I've asked my sister-in-law, I said, has anybody found her? Like, do you know where she is? And she's like, she's out of the system, she's on the streets. And so the Lord had it that He brought us back to the States in October of last year. And in November, my daughter, Leah, gets a message from a girl in Maine on Instagram saying, Julia's looking for your family, how can she find you? And I was like, what? Like, she went out looking for us. And through social media, believe it or not, she was at a friend's house who has internet access, and I said, well, get her on Facebook or something where we can communicate. I'm not on any Russian sites, and neither is he. So we were actually sitting in church when I got the friend request from her. And I just remember sitting there thinking, like, and she wrote in Russian, and she said, you know, can you Skype? I'm at my friend's house, and I'm like, hang on, baby, 10 minutes, I'm home. And we went home, and we opened up Skype, and, you know, sure enough, there was the phone call. And I looked at her, and she looked at us, and she said, Mom, I found you, you know. And I just kept crying and apologizing to her. I said, Julia, we dropped the ball on you, you know, we really did. And she said, don't worry about it, I'm fine, just come and get me. And so we instantly thought, you know what, we're going to find out if we can do student visa because she's out of the system. You know, we were thinking quick, like, we need to get her out of there. And so she couldn't get a student visa. The next step was we ended up paying for an agency. We paid for the visa and a passport. We were thinking we can get her a visitation visa, and then once she's here, we'll hire a lawyer. She has nowhere over there. We'll just, you know, figure out a way to keep her. And we really believe with all of our heart. I just claimed her. I'm like, Lord, you brought it to us. You're going to bring her solidly here. And she ended up having to go for 5 hours. She's at this little town, and she had to go to Kiev, and we connected with Helen in Russia, who has done a lot of adoptions for families, and she said, listen, I'll help you, I'll find her, I'll help her, because I'm thinking, how is she going to get to Kiev, and how is she going to go to the embassy? And she just kept saying, Mom, no problem, I'll figure it out, like, just tell me the appointment, I'll go. And so we're like super high hopes, we're thinking, this is it, she's going to get her visitation visa. I mean, we're like ready to book the airline ticket, and she goes in, she had to travel quite far, 5 hours, and she goes in for the appointment. It took less than 2 minutes. The minute she said she was an orphan, they gave her a denial stamp. And Helen, she's Skyping, she said she came out just completely crushed and crying, like, they just gave me a stamp of denial, you know, and we paid this agency that said, we can guarantee you she's going to get the visa, we'll prop her, we'll make sure she gets it, but I think God had different plans, and so here we were thinking, what are we going to do, you know, and starting to call agencies, adoption agencies, and everyone is kind of, you know, moving us around, and no, you can't, you can, it's $37,000, and I mean, we're just hearing all these crazy stories, and our situation was we moved overseas, and we came back, and we pretty much depleted all of our savings. I mean, we had to buy a house, we went through tremendous hardship in our family, and I mean, we literally were like, Lord, this cannot be the worst timing ever. Like, we don't have a penny to our name right now, I mean, we're just getting by. And he just kept saying, walk on the water, like just walk on the water, like she's yours, just keep walking. And so I remember just looking at him like, we've got to talk about adoption again, like we have to. Well, then the US law is, past 16 you can no longer adopt internationally. So once the child is 16, if you have not started the process, the US will not accept adoption. Unless there's a younger sibling. So I'm like, oh my gosh, there is her little brother. He's still in the orphanage. And so I said, ask him if he wants to be adopted. Then we'll adopt him, and through adopting him, they will make exceptions for older siblings unless they're 18 and older. And he was just like, sure. You know, he's like, I'll go anywhere. And so we actually, I started posting on Facebook about help. I'm like, where do I start? Because the adoption laws have changed. There's so many regulations. There's so many crooks out there that literally will just, I mean, they will take your money. And one agent actually, by me just questioning him on everything, dropped the price on his website by $10,000. And that shouldn't be that way. You know, so my prayer is that that people will do adoption, but also that the other side of it, you know, that makes it affordable. And so anyways, I posted on the McKinney Moms group, like, hey, I need some help with adoption, and, you know, does anybody know anything? And, you know, share our story. We created a GoFundMe page, and I'm like, maybe someone has a heart for adoption and they'll be able to donate something. And I get a message from sweet Jessica over there on my Facebook, and she's like, hey, I have a heart for Ukrainian orphans, and I just would love to talk to you. And she's like, I've hosted for 2 years already. We're bringing more orphans in the summer. I just want to meet you. And I'm like, you live in McKinney, really? So she had done all kinds of research on adoption, even though she wasn't adopting yet. And because of her research, I was able to find the person to do the home study and the review and recommendation for way, way less than anybody was telling me. And I would have never found them. It was all because God connected us. And so Jessica, actually, right there, my sweet friend, is hosting little Katya right now, and Katya is right there from Ukraine. So she, poor thing, doesn't understand a word of English. She's an orphan that is, she was dropped off when she was 6 years old and left by her parents. And her orphanage actually just recently was bombed by the war, and they had to pack up and run over, I think, 500 orphans. And right now they're all living in a shelter, and they're so innocent and so sweet, and just so, this is her first time being out of the country, and here she is, you know, in a family that was already falling in love with her. And actually Jessica is hosting 2 children. Dasha, who's not with us here today, but little Katya is, and she's adoptable, and I think they are going to pursue adoption there as well, which is amazing. But you guys can be part of that, you know, and the hosting program is what opens the door to a lot of kids that would never be picked on a paper because that they just wouldn't because of their age. And in Maine, I think there's already over 10 kids now that have been adopted in one community because of the hosting program. There's been a sibling set of 3, a sibling set of 2. My sister-in-law went back and got her 3rd child. She says, Irma, watch out, it's addicting. Once you get started, you can't stop. So the way it is right now, we have our fence covered. The Lord is so amazing. Like, we've covered the home study, we've covered the fee for the review and recommendation. Our next big chunk is the $5,000 for our Ukrainian agent, who also dropped the price because she's so in love with Julia. She's like, Irma, this kid is absolutely amazing. And once in a while, we're in touch with her when she can get to someone's house. The other day, she Skyped us and she'll just sit there and just watch us. And I'm like, you know, I'm just working. She's like, it's okay, I just want to see you, Mom. You know, and she'll ask, the minute I'm on there, she's like, where's Dad? You know, where's Noah? Where's Leah? And when are you coming for me? And the other day she sent me a message through our agency and she says, tell my mom I love you, I miss you, and don't forget me. So, you know, when you realize that these are God's children, they're just, you know, born in a horrible situation. She's one of 7 siblings. The father just gave him up. He withdrew all his rights, and the mom is an alcoholic. 90% of children in the Ukraine are orphans because of alcohol. Alcohol is the big enemy there. And they don't take care of their children, and then the government takes them away. There's over 1 million orphans just in Russia, and most of them by abandonment. And they don't really understand family. They don't, even if they've been in a family, they've never been taught family. And so they're taught survival, you know. And so a lot of times when people host children, they can get upset with them because they'll grab the food first. As a matter of fact, when Jessica went and picked up the children, you flew to
Dulles.
To pick up the children. How many did you bring?
8 or 9.
8 or 9
Back
children.
to Dallas, from Dulles to Dallas.
Yeah, and brave lady. I mean, my goodness, you know, no speaking their language. And she said one little boy was standing at the buffet just stuffing his pockets with food, like would not stop. And they said, how do you tell a child your next meal is coming? They don't understand. You know, they're out to survive and they're out to just fend for themselves. And you know, when I even asked Julia, like, what can I bring you? What do you need? And she just keeps saying nothing. Like, nothing. Just come and get me. Like, they're not out to, you know, get stuff. You know, they just want a family. Most of them say, we just want a family. We just want a mom and dad to love us. And so your raffle tickets, you're paying for the burger. I want to say thank you to Cadence